The big question amid the COVID pandemic has been how to go back to normality as far as schools and other education institutes are concerned. What is the Modi government thinking on this front? What are the state governments thinking on this front? How do we plan to reopen schools? How do we plan to reopen colleges? What is the model that will be followed? These are the answers that we will seek in this episode of Government Matters, which is live. I have with me Kritika Sharma, who covers education for The Print. And in fact, yesterday she broke the story on what the possible model could be for restarting school. So Kritika, let's first talk about the story you did, which clearly mentioned that there is a plan, there is a proposal in place for a staggered opening of schools.
Exactly, Ruhi. So actually after, we've had discussions some time back also. Now finally the government seems to have a plan to reopen schools. Exactly right now we can't say when the schools will reopen because the pandemic is still on. But what the plan is that whenever the schools reopen, first schools will reopen in the green zones, and orange zones. The red zones will be kept for later, or the schools might not even reopen there for a long time. But that's the plan to begin with when it comes to reopening the schools. Now, when it comes to students, the government wants to call only a certain section of students or a certain level of students. They don't want to call in the younger students right now because they think that they'll be more at the risk of infection. So currently, they're planning that students from only 8th to 12th standard will be called into schools.
So those who are aware of social distancing norms and able to practice it.
Social distancing norms, exactly. So the reason behind it is you can't always expect from younger students to keep wearing masks and sanitizing their hands and not sit in close proximity while having their lunch or just generally chatting amongst themselves. So they don't want to call in the younger students as of now.
Right. So the idea is to call in students, as you mentioned, from class 8 to 12. But then what happens to the others? They continue to do online classes?
Yeah, they continue to do online classes. This is something which is going to be introduced in the Indian school system now, which is a blended learning model. So students who are not attending classes, they're not coming to schools, they'll continue to keep taking classes online from their homes. Once the schools are fully reopened, they come back to the classrooms. So that's how the system is going to be.
Right. Now, between this 8 to 12, would all the students come in every day? Because that might also crowd up the school.
Yeah, that might also crowd up the school. So that's what these are also some of the things that the government is looking at on how to implement these things. Because the plan right now is that to have a staggered attendance. In fact, the HRD minister has also said in one of his interactions that only 30% students will be called into schools. And that could happen either by having the school in 2 shifts, morning shift and an afternoon shift, or by calling students by date-wise, like half the students will come on one day and the other half will come on the other day, something like that. So as not to crowd the classrooms.
Right. Now, this is as far as schools are concerned, but it gets even more difficult with colleges because exams were due, new sessions had to begin. What is going to happen as far as undergraduate and postgraduate courses are concerned?
Yeah, so in fact, for the higher education institutions, the government has come up with a plan much longer before they decided about the schools. About a month back, UGC came up with a number of guidelines on how education institutions, the higher education institutions should reopen. They plan to start holding classes from August. For the second and third year students, and for the final year students, the third year students, the classes are supposed to be held in September. So, this is going by the estimates that, the infection will kind of come down by that time and it will be safer to open schools and colleges.
Right.
So, September again for first years and for second and third years in August.
Right.
But then again, all the social distancing norms will have to be followed. And for the higher education institutions also, for colleges also, the government is, the rules are that you have to follow social distancing norms. Not all students will be called in at one time. So, these are the things that will
be done. Now let's start taking a few audience questions, Kritika. This one is from a handle named Artistic. How is the government going to conduct NEET and JEE mains? Because these exams are held in big cities and almost all big cities in India are currently red zones.
So first of all, the exam dates have already been announced. The exams will, NEET and JEE both will be held in July. What the government plans, first of all, is to double the number of test centers. so that distance can be maintained between students. And in a usual exam center, there are 24 students who usually sit in a exam center. What the government is now trying is to decrease the number of students. There will be only 12 students who will sit in one classroom, so that there is enough distance. Then students will have to wear masks and constantly keep sanitizing their hands. Some centers are also thinking of having thermal scanners and having temperature checks before the students come in. So these are the things, the norms that they plan to follow.
Right. There's a question from Pradyumna B. Ravi. Is it not time where the government lays more emphasis on e-learning and making sure to equip educational institutions with better infrastructure facilities in order to ensure health security?
Yeah, so like I said earlier also, the government is planning that schools and colleges will shift to a more of a blended learning approach.
Right.
Which means half of the lessons will be completed through the classroom one-on-one interaction mode, and half of the lessons will be done through online mode. In fact, online learning is something that the government is focusing a lot these days.
Right. But there is also criticism on that front, Kritika, because not everybody has access to internet, to smartphones, to gadgets, and that somewhere down the line this is becoming discriminatory. And you also did a story, in fact.
Yeah, I did write that, but Ruhi, right now what the government and the agencies say is that they don't have an option because the lockdown is going on, and they had to start the classes anyhow. So everybody is doing whatever they could.
Right.
For students who don't have access to anything, to smartphones or to internet, there are channels, TV channels. Government has this, Swayam Prabha channels, so students can learn through that. When you come to school education, schools that don't have things like Zoom classes or Google Meet classes, their teachers are giving lessons to students through WhatsApp. The students are, doing their homework and then sending it to their teachers.
Right.
So somehow or the other, they are just making sure that there is some kind of learning happening at that.
Right. And
right
some
now.
Communication between
Some
teachers and
communication,
students.
yeah. Of course, this can't.
It's not ideal, but yeah.
It's not ideal. It's not a substitute to the regular classroom teacher-student interaction. But this is just something to keep them going.
There's little option as of now. Joel Jason, can the states have a say in regarding reopening of schools? Can states have their own rules as far as this is concerned?
Yeah. In fact, states, the guidelines aren't out right now, but this is how it's going to be when the government says that schools in green and orange zones will open first. So it will ultimately come to the states to decide at the state level and the district level which areas can open the schools and which can't. So obviously states will have a say.
Right. Well, there's a question from Swami Venkata, but we've already answered that question. Essentially the question was about access to internet, to smartphones and gadgets, and how this brings a divide between the better off, the haves and have-nots. But since you've already answered that, Rishabh Bhattacharya, is it the right time to open up schools when cases are still rising?
So exactly, like I said in the beginning of our discussion, there is no date as of now to when schools will reopen, but you have to get back to normalcy, right? Because the flights have started operating and everything else. So you have to, but the government will look at a window, look at a suitable time according to the intensity of infections and the number of infections, and only then the schools will open.
Right. So essentially there's no decision yet. These are just plans and proposal which will depend on how the virus progresses. Fateh Singh, this is a question from one of our Twitter followers. What SOP is the government formulating for lowering the risk of infection for students and teachers when they return to school?
Yeah, so like I said some time back, it will be a list of safety guidelines that the government will come up, which will include having no assemblies in schools for a long time, having no contact sports, regular sanitization of classrooms and surfaces that students and teachers touch a lot, like the benches, the chairs and the blackboards and things like that. That will happen. Also, less number of students in one class, then students will sit at a distance, and things like that. And common spaces, common assemblies will not be allowed. In fact, they're also thinking that canteens shouldn't be open, because that's one place where all students can just assemble during the lunchtime. So canteens shouldn't be open. So these are some of the safety guidelines that are going to come up.
Paras Malik, isn't it time the government go ahead with a GMAT format examination on when not everyone giving exams at the same time and having both paper-based and online-based tests. So essentially, whether we can move more online as far as examinations and entrance exams are concerned.
Yeah, so to answer this question, India currently, I've spoken to a lot of experts about this, and the teachers also say this. In fact, the University Grants Commission, in fact, says that the India is not ready for online kind of examination right now, because like we said earlier, there is a huge difference between who can attend the online classes and who can't. So what will you do when you have to take the online exam? So we are essentially not ready for this kind of an online examination right now. In fact, I'll tell you about Delhi University. Right now, there is a proposal in Delhi University for an online exam, and there is a lot of opposition.
And you've been following that story up, in fact.
Yeah, we've been following that story at ThePrint. There is a lot of opposition to that, and Delhi University is a central university. It has students from all kinds of backgrounds. So essentially the problem is that there are students in rural areas also, or in far-flung areas, who don't have access to facilities. So how will they write an exam?
Right. Arjun Parameswaran, will there be a relaxation on school fees under present conditions as there has been a prolonged lockdown? This has been a question which has actually become a bone of contention with particularly private schools charging as much as they do all the time. They're even charging for transport fees in many cases. So what is the government doing on that front?
So this depends on state to state. Different state governments have been coming up with notifications and telling schools, private schools, not to charge fees. In fact, Delhi government has told schools to charge only tuition fee during the lockdown and not increase their fee till the time this lockdown is going on, because a lot of parents, some have lost their jobs, some are not being paid, and people find it difficult to manage things during these times. So Delhi government has done that. In fact, there was an order for schools in Gurugram. Gujarat government did that. So different state governments are coming up with notifications like that.
Right. Sayak Roy, if schools in certain areas open and those in others don't, how will the school curriculum be maintained? How will there be uniformity for all students to sit for exams? This is actually a good question. It came to my mind as well, because those who go to school obviously have an advantage in terms of learning. It's easier to do it. That's the reason why we go to school and we don't study at home. So, how do you bring about that uniformity? Because at the end of it, everybody will take the same exam.
So there are certain ideas that are floating around right now. One is, of course, the blended learning model, as I spoke about earlier. Like half the syllabus should be completed online and half should be done in the classroom through the interactive mode. The other thing is to reduce the number of holidays. Now that we're already seeing that schools are not going to open for some time and staggered attendance, so what the government is thinking is that all these holidays that students would get, winter vacations and Diwali, Dussehra, these kind of holidays. So those holidays should cut down. Doesn't mean that you won't get even a single Diwali.
Right, but it's like you won't get 1 week for Diwali, for instance.
So those kind of things. So reduce the number of vacations that students will get. So that we can make up for the gap that has already been created or might be created in the longer run.
Vidhi, this is a question from Vidhi. Can you please throw some light on the functioning of kindergarten schools? Well, maybe Vidhi has a daughter or a son who she is worried about going back to school.
So first of all, kindergartners will not have to go to school for a long time because they are in the the junior
more vulnerable category.
Vulnerable category. How will you tell those kids to maintain distance and wear masks all the time? So I think for them, they will be studying online and at home for a long time. That's how learning will go on for the kindergartners.
Nilesh Srivastava, what about colleges with mandatory hostel enrollments? How and by when would they be open? So one is mandatory hostels, but also what about students? So even if you open, will they open up hostels as well? Even in schools, say boarding schools, will they open up hostels?
See, once the schools reopen, the hostels will also have to reopen because, especially Navodaya Vidyalayas. But there is no decision as of now from the government side on the government boarding hostels like Navodaya Vidyalaya, so they haven't taken a call so far. When it comes to private schools, it's completely up to them on how they want to reopen the schools, whether they want to call in all the students at once, or again the staggered attendance thing.
Right. I'll take one last question. This is again from Rishabh Bhattacharya. As we have seen in public hospitals, facilities are not fully available. Will the facilities for sanitations be available in public schools? So that is another concern. It's all very well to say that there would be regular sanitation or sanitizing exercises that will take place, and everybody will wear gloves and masks. But will it really happen? The key is in the implementation.
Yeah. So this is all for us to see, will it really happen or not. Also, another thought that came to my mind also, I mean, the government wants to reopen schools whenever they do, and calling only older children, but how many parents will send their kids to school?
Parents would be worried about it.
That's also concerned, because like this reader has the question in his mind. I mean, the parents might also have this question in their mind. Will the school have all the facilities? Will my child be safe? So that's also going to be a concern. So it is going to be a difficult and long road when it comes to bringing back normalcy in education institutions. But at least a start has been made.
Right. Well, as Kritika says, it is a difficult route to going back to normal as far as schools and colleges are concerned, particularly schools, because they're younger children, not as aware of social and physical distancing. But as she said, a start has to be made at some point. We have to return to normality. And as of now, what she's detailed out is the plan that the government has in place. Thank you so much for watching Government Matters and for sending in your questions. Do keep subscribing to our YouTube channel.